All right, hello there. Welcome to this conversation about Dostoevsky's novella, The Crocodile, which was published in 1865 in Dostoevsky's, I believe you call it Epoch magazine. Epoch magazine. It's a, it's really short, as you can see. It's a thinny. Look how thin that is. Anyways, probably like 75 pages, if that. No, it's not even 75 pages in length. It's like 59 pages in length. Okay. Well, the crocodile, what's it about? It's about this guy named Ivan, Ivan, I don't know. I'm just going to call him Ivan. Ivan Madvik, I don't know how you say his last name. He is a Russian civil servant who goes to an arcade, not like an arcade where you go and you play like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter 2 on the arcade machine. Do arcades even exist anymore? I don't think they do, but no, it's more like a menagerie type thing. And then there's a German there at the arcade on Nevsky Street, St. Petersburg, who has a crocodile, and Ivan pays his money to go in and see this thing, and he's like messing around with the crocodile, and the crocodile swallows him whole. Okay, that's what happens. That's the gist of it. It gets really silly after that because he's alive and he's speaking from within the belly of the beast. And they're going to cut the crocodile open, and then they get into a discussion about economics, saying, well, the crocodile is the source of capital. So, like, you can't just cut it open. It's private property. It belongs to the German, and now its value is increased because of the fact that there's a living man speaking from within inside the belly of the crocodile. Now people are going to want to come to see the crocodile, and they're willing to pay more money so that they can observe this strange phenomenon of this man speaking from inside. So the capital of the crocodile has gone up in value, and therefore you have to pay more money. So they get into a discussion about economics. So it's like making fun of like capitalism. And then the narrator of this goes and talks to another civil servant. I think he's a higher ranking. I'm not exactly sure. That's like the second chapter. Interesting, silly stuff. I thought the most interesting chapter was chapter 3, where the narrator goes to speak to Ivan, who is within the crocodile, and he gets into a discussion about economics and political theory. And then the final section of the book, the narrator goes and talks to Ivan's wife, and she is kind of Yelena. Her name is Yelena Ivanovna. Yelena is considering divorcing Ivan, and moving on with her life. So, political satire. Basically, Dostoevsky poking fun at all of the various movements that were happening in Russia at the time in the 1860s. So I don't want to go into a big background on all of the stuff that was happening in Russia at the time. Obviously, the big thing is the social reforms that were taking place in the 1860s with the release of the serfs in 1861, the abolition of serfdom in Russia. But yeah, I've talked about a whole bunch of Dostoevsky novels at this point, so I'm not going to get into the whole background about him being in the Petrashevsky circle and everything. But a lot of people at the time thought that this was poking fun at Nikolai Chernyshevsky, the writer of a very influential and popular work at the time, which is called What is to Be Done? And I have to admit, I've never read it. I'm going to have to remedy that because it's a very important novella or novel by Nikolai Chernyshevsky. It was hailed by Vladimir Lenin and Karl Marx. And Chernyshevsky was like kind of a very big figure in Russian nihilism. Okay, and Russian nihilism. What do we mean by nihilism? Means the abolition of the church, like getting rid of the church and getting rid of the czar. So getting rid of the king, essentially, and then having a society that is based on communism, communal living of the peasant class, right? So, yeah, Dostoevsky was not a fan of this idea at all. He was incensed by Chernyshevsky's novel, and as a result, he was inspired to write Notes from Underground. So a lot of people thought that when he wrote The Crocodile that he was making fun of Chernyshevsky because Nikolai Chernyshevsky was exiled to Siberia, and here you have a man who is living inside of the belly of a crocodile. So I thought, oh, he's making fun of this guy. Well, Dostoevsky clears it up because there is this excerpt, writer, the appendix, the diary of a writer, and he says, I met Chernyshevsky when I was released from Siberia in 1859. He says here, the first time I met Nikolai Gavrilovich Chernyshevsky was in 1859, the very first year after returning from Siberia. I don't recall where or how it was. Afterwards, we met several times, but not very frequently. We chatted, but not a great deal. Incidentally, we always shook hands. So they had a cordial relationship with each other. And Dostoevsky goes on to say that I liked Chernyshevsky, his appearance and manner. Okay, so like he didn't personally hate Chernyshevsky at all. In fact, he liked him. Um, Skimming down through this, he says that Chernyshevsky was arrested and exiled, um, but that the inspiration for this was not Chernyshevsky, it was Gogol's story The Nose. He goes on to give a lengthy and accurate description of the plot of The Crocodile, of this particular short story. And then he says, like, where it appeared in Epoch magazine, the journal, in 1865. And essentially is just trying to clear up and say, hey, this allegory is not attacking Chernyshevsky. So, in fact, Dostoevsky says here, and I think this is very admirable. Dostoevsky says, Chernyshevsky never offended me with his convictions. One can have a great deal of respect for a person whose views differ radically from one's own. So, just because somebody doesn't agree with you politically or in the realm of religion or whatever, like you can still have a cordial and respectful relationship with them and like them personally, even though you don't agree with their ideology. And I think that's admirable. It's an admirable quality to have in a person, and it's something that I try to aspire to. My dog is barking. It's annoying. All right, I don't even know where I was. So the crocodile. Thought the most interesting section of the book was section 3, and a little bit of a Dune connection. At least I felt like it was connected to Frank Herbert, and I was wondering, was Frank Herbert inspired by this for God Emperor of Dune? So if you haven't read Dune, I've talked to you about the plot about this novella already, and you don't want Dune spoiled, now would probably be a good time to check out. It's not like a major spoiler. I think that the cover of the book, of the Dune books, probably spoils it for everybody anyways. So just go ahead and talk about God Emperor. In God Emperor of Dune, Leto the Second, actually this happens in a previous book, but Leto the Second is the God Emperor. He has merged himself with one of the sandworms. And God Emperor of Dune is it's almost like a philosophical and political treatise rather than an actual novel. So it's essentially a, millenniums old worm man who is expounding political ideology and his theories on the fate of mankind, proposing his golden path towards the survival of the species. It's very Nietzschean. It's weird. And in a way, this kind of reminded me of it. Now, the political ideology of Ivan, or Ivan here, and Leto II, vastly different. But the uh, the chapter where Ivan is speaking from within the belly of the crocodile very much reminded me of God Emperor of Dune. And I was like just wondering and pondering. Frank Herbert had to have been inspired by this, right? Or am I wrong? I don't know. Okay. So in chapter 3, the narrator goes to speak to Ivan, and this very much reminded me of God Emperor of Dune when Mineo often goes to speak to Leto, who is like the worm god, right? On Arrakis. At this point, it's called Arrakis. And they have political conversation with each other. Just very much reminded me of that, even though it's very short compared to God Emperor of Dune, which is like a big old chunker. But the narrator here goes to speak to Ivan, and he says to him, uh, you wouldn't be finding it dull in there, right? That's what he says. And he says, no, this is Ivan speaking. No, because I'm brimming over with mighty ideas. Only now am I able to dream at leisure about improving the fate of all of mankind. Which, improving the fate of all of mankind is what Leto II is obsessed with in the God Emperor of Dune, like the Golden Path. So even though the political ideology is different, like Leto II is a very oppressive tyrant. What do you call it? Like an autocrat, right? And you know, Ivan here he's a utopian socialist, okay? But the similarities I was just struck by. He says, only now am I able to dream at leisure about improving the fate of all mankind. Truth and light will now issue forth from a crocodile. There is no doubt that I shall devise my own theory of economic relationships, and I shall be proud of it, which is something that hitherto I've been unable to do because of the vulgar amusements of society and the lack of leisure enforced by having to work. I shall revolutionize everything, and I shall become the new Fourier. Now, Fourier was a French utopian socialist. Okay, it was very popular in Russia in the late 19th century when Dostoevsky is writing this. But yeah, it's kind of funny and bizarre and weird, and this is probably the weirdest thing that I've ever seen Dostoevsky write. He gets into like this whole thing about the anatomy of the crocodile, and it's purely just nonsense. He says like, oh, they're asking about the heart and the lungs of the crocodile, and how comfortable are you in there? And he's all like, I'm fine. Here, the narrator asks him about the his arrangements inside. He says to him that they get into a discussion about longevity. He says the whole inside of the crocodile is very spacious, smells like rubber, and he says that let's see here. The interior consists of what seems to be an enormous empty bag made of rubber, something like manufactured rubber goods that are prevalent here on Gorakovia Street. I butchered that. Um, he says, is it possible? This is the narrator. Is it possible? I cried in plain amazement. Can a crocodile be completely empty? Completely, Ivan Medvik insisted with authority, and in all probability the crocodile has been so constructed in accordance with the laws of nature itself. He talks about the jaws and everything else, but he says that the entire inside of the crocodile is open and spacious and kind of like an encasement of rubber. The narrator says here, "What about the ribs, stomach, and the intestines, the liver, and the heart?" He says, "Nothing, absolutely nothing of the sort, and probably there never was. All of it is the idle fantasy of frivolous travelers. Um, just as people inflate hemorrhoidal cushions, I am now inflating the crocodile with myself. It's unbelievably elastic. Room could be made for you here beside me as a family friend if you possess the magnanimity, and still there would be room even for you present. As a last resort, I'm even thinking of instructing Yelena Ivanovna to join me here." That's Ivan's wife. He's like trying to get his wife to come in, but and then he talks about like kind of having like a symbiotic relationship with the crocodile, that he's being fed by the crocodile's juices or something. I don't know. It's bizarre. He speculates that he'll be able to live because of the long life of reptiles. That because he has now become like one, or has a symbiotic relationship with the crocodile, he'll be able to live for like over 1,000 years, and come up with all of his economic and political theories. So you see here how it like reminded me of the God Emperor of Dune, because it's essentially what Leto II does. He merges with the sandworm so that he can live for millennia, coming up with theories concerning the fate of mankind. So this is a weird story. Um, it was a lot of fun. It was completely bizarre. If you are a fan of God Emperor of Dune, or Frank Herbert's Dune series, definitely check this out. This is a very weird novella. Anyways, let me know what you think about all of this. And as always, thank you for watching. Comment below. Give me a like if you like the video. Yeah, you know all the stuff. Whatever. Have a wonderful day.